Awesome. Christian Cultural Center, welcome. Mount Lebanon Baptist Church, yes. St. Martin de Porres, Brooklyn, New York, welcome. Macedonia AME. Namaste SPCBC, welcome, welcome. Good evening, CCC, okay. Judy Jones from Safe Haven. Welcome, welcome. Mount Moriah AME, welcome. We're going to get started in about 2 more minutes. We're getting there. Beulah Church of Nazarene, welcome. Okay, Mount Moriah, I see you. St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, yes. Wayside Baptist Church, Bronx Bethany Church of Nazarene, St. Jude's RC Church in Brooklyn. Amazing. We're so excited to have you here today. Christ Baptist Church of Corona, New York. Okay, Quorum, New York. My apologies. Awesome. We're going to get started in 1 more minute. Hey, I think we can get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Again, I thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jessica A. Bailey, and I am a proud member of the Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated Sigma Kappa Zeta chapter. I am pleased to be your moderator for tonight's impactful webinar entitled Community Conversations, The Fight for Democracy, How to Become Politically Aware and Active Headed into the 2024 election season. Under the leadership of our international president, Dr. Stacy N.C. Grant, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated embraces the extraordinary power of she, serving and advocating for social health and economic justice for everyone at home and abroad. Tonight's conversation is part of a series in which we have engaged in essential conversations that ensure that we all have a seat at the table to advocate for change in our communities. Our primary focus today will be on the upcoming June 25th primary election. The goal for tonight is to ensure that you all are civically educated so that you can also educate others. Before we begin today, I just want to take a moment to thank our partners for their valuable contributions to tonight's webinar. If you hear your house of worship, feel free to clap in the chat. Bethany Baptist Church, Antioch Baptist Church, the Cornerstone Baptist Church, First Baptist Church of Crown Heights, Church Women United, St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, the 67th Clergy Council, God Squad, the African American Clergy and Elected Officials Coalition, Bright Light Baptist Church, Mount Moriah AME Church, and we also want to take a special thanks to Ronnie Pep Souvenir, the Commissioner of the Board of Elections. Thank you for joining us this evening. Alone, we can do so little, but together we can do so much. So we thank you all. Just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. We have reserved time at the end for a question and answer period. If you have any questions during the meeting, feel free to type them in the chat at any time, or you can raise your hand during the Q&A. Tonight, our panelists will be two members of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, SKZ chapter. You will hear from two of my sorority sisters, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker and Dr. Zelima Blair, who will speak on topics like protecting the vote, trends around voter elections, what's on the ballot, and provide you with some next steps. I'm going to just give you a brief overview of our panelists, and they'll begin. Assemblywoman Latrice M. Walker has been serving people her entire adult life. She brings to the New York State Assembly a passion and fortitude, reminiscent of the streets of Brownsville, Brooklyn, where she was born and raised. In her beloved 55th District, she is a mentor to young people and is beloved by seniors. She is a familiar face in churches, businesses, and in the courtyards of public housing developments that no doubt remind her of Prospect Plaza houses where she was raised. Our second panelist for this evening, Dr. Zelima Blair, is currently professor and chairperson of the nationally ranked Department of Public Administration at Medgar Evers College. Dr. Blair recently served as the interim executive director of the Du Bois Bunch Center for Public Policy, the Redistricting Research Director, and the Redistricting Research Director for the Center for Law and Social Justice. Assemblywoman Walker, take it away.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. Good evening to my finest sorors of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and of course, to all of our community worshipers who are joining with us today. We know that a family that prays together stays together. And so I am also very humbled by your introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate on today's panel. So I am a proud representative of New York State's 55th Assembly District. I'm the chair of the Assembly's Election Law Committee, and I was proud to be the Assembly sponsor of the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of New York. It was signed into law 2 years ago, and this landmark piece of legislation delivered the most comprehensive voter protections of any state in the country. We recognize that if Congress didn't act, that New York State had to stand in the void. It also honored, of course, our late frat brother for whom the law is named. I'm happy to be joined for this important and timely community conversation by fellow panelist, Dr. Zelima Blair, who recently we welcomed to our finer womanhood. And thank you, Soror Jessica Bailey, another one of our talented new Sorors, for moderating. As we sit here on June 12th, we are just 3 days away before the first of 9 days of early voting in New York State. Please make sure that you are registered and double check your polling site for early voting, which is often at a different location than your primary day polling site, which of course is on June 25th. For the general election, we have to always be mindful, which is in November, that we have everything in order as well. Okay, so let's get into it. The Election Law Committee is responsible for all legislation that affects elections on the national, state, and local levels, including ballot access, voter registration and enrollment, voter education and outreach, campaign financing, and administrative procedures of the state and local boards of elections. The ultimate goal of the 16-member committee, in my eyes, is to make voting easy, accessible, and more efficient. We hold committee votes on legislation before measures are brought to the floor by the Assembly Speaker for a vote by all 150 members of the Assembly. If approved by the Assembly and the Senate, the bills then go to the governor, who generally has until the end of the calendar year to sign them into law or veto them. The 2024 legislative session just ended last weekend, and we passed 805 bills. I promise not to get into all of them, but I do want to touch on a few bills that related to voting that we passed during this session. For those of you taking notes at home, lawmakers passed A723, which allows municipalities to set up drop boxes where voters can deposit their absentee ballots instead of having to mail them. It simply makes voting easier, and the hope, of course, is that more people will exercise their right to vote. 25 states already allow or require drop boxes, including New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. I sponsored a bill, and it was passed, that would enact a set of amendments to the Voting Rights Act that will make sure it's implemented as effectively and as soon as possible. It clarifies the definition of protected class to include individuals who are members of any race, color, or language minority group that has ever been officially recognized by the United States Census Bureau. The bill also specifies certain deceptive and fraudulent acts related to elections and voting and grants the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, the authority to issue subpoenas and enforce the provisions of the Voting Rights Act. Basically, the bill does more, it more clearly defines the power of the Attorney General as it relates to the Voting Rights Act and provides more clarity for the covered communities and districts. We also passed a bill to address the use of artificial intelligence in political communications. Some of you might remember that 10-second audio that surfaced in January that made it sound like Manhattan Democratic Party leader and former Assemblyman Keith Wright made disparaging remarks about Assemblywoman Inez Dickens. The recording, of course, was fake, and its creator was clearly trying to influence the race for an assembly seat. Dirty tricks, as we know, aren't new in politics, but unfortunately, using artificial intelligence or similar technology as a tool to create deception and spread misinformation is a rapidly growing threat. So it only makes sense that lawmakers took aggressive action to control it. Certainly, there are legitimate and practical uses of artificial intelligence, including in politics. The technology can be used for fundraising to help with robocalls and other uses that most of us haven't even thought about yet. But as soon as we head into election season, it's critical that the use of artificial intelligence in politics is properly regulated. It is a growing threat to fair elections and therefore a threat to our democracy. Finally, we passed a bill that required the Board of Elections to provide a postage-paid envelope in which voters return what are called cure affirmation forms. These are forms that make sure ballot mistakes are fixed and that the ballots accurately reflect the voter's intent. Under the bill, voters can send the forms back within 7 days following the election, and they can also be sent electronically via email or uploaded. It is also worth noting that this particular measure was sponsored by Assemblywoman Stephanie Zinnerman. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that every New Yorker has an opportunity to cast their ballot. Politics is not a spectator sport, so please do your part. Get out there and vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. I am Assemblymember Latrice Walker.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, for that presentation. Again, get out and vote like your life depends on it, because it does. I'll reiterate that statement because I think it's very powerful. Thank you again. Now, our next panelist for this evening is Dr. Zelima Blair. Dr. Zelima Blair will go over who's on the ballot, what's on the ballot, and what everyone should know. Take it away, Dr. Blair.
Thank you, Soror Jessica. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Dr. Zelima Blair, as was iterated before. I am a professor and chairperson in the Department of Public Administration. And before I move on, I would like to thank the Honorable Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, who just gave us that informative presentation on the process, because we know the New York State controls election laws. All states in their respective states control election laws. And I would also like to give a word of recognition to our honorable president of our chapter, Shirley Carroll, and our colleagues on the Social Action Committee for making this happen. So next slide, please. So before we move forward, I would like to acknowledge our founders, the Five Pearls. Because of them, we are socially active, civically engaged, and community conscious. Next slide, please. So the reason we're here tonight, it's why voting matters. Why do we vote? Who do we vote for? What do the people that we vote for do, and what do they do for us? When is this supposed to take place? And of course, your questions and answers. Next slide, please. So before we move forward, the professor tells me that we want to do a poll, right? And the first poll, first question, do you know who is on the ballot for this upcoming June 25th primary election? And then we'll get into why it's so important. So if we could launch this poll for our audience.
Is everybody seeing the poll?
No, I'm not seeing.
No.
No, we are not.
No.
Well, while we get in the poll, because there will be other opportunities to do a poll, by a show of hands, tell me if you know who is on the ballot for this upcoming election. You're not getting out of it that quickly. And if you're an elected official or you work in government, you can't do that. But I'll let you slide. So everyone, does everyone know? I see 1, 2. Most people said, most people did not know. And so that's why it's critically important, because primary elections usually determine who will be our elected leaders for the next 2 years for some, and for others 10 years, and for some 14 years. So it's critically important that we understand what this means. And the reason why that happens is because in primary elections, Democrats, at least in New York State, outnumber Republicans 5-1. Sometimes we would not know it because we have to show up in these polls. But most of the time, we know that if we elect our primary person in primary elections, that will be the person for the remainder of the term. Next slide, please. So it looks like we have a lot of work to do this evening. So why is voting important? So as you can see, voting is the heart of any democratic republic. If you are voting, this is where you are considered equal. So if you do not vote, folks, you cannot complain. This is a key part of our democratic government. This is where, no matter what, when we go into the voting booth, no matter our race, our gender, our age, presumably we're adults, that we are equal to the next voter in that voting booth. Most importantly, you do not want to be out-mobilized. And what that means, you do not want to be outnumbered in the poll. You want your voice to be heard all through our democratic halls, all through our elected officials' halls, whichever way we choose to do so. So voting matters. Never let anyone tell you that it does not matter. So if you are out-mobilized, meaning that more people show up on the other side of the public policy issue that you're advocating for, then you and your comrades, then you will be underrepresented. Okay, so the more mobilized you are and we are as a community, the more we are likely to vote, and the more we're likely to get our public policy issues passed, and the more likely we're able to stick together as a community. Next slide, please. So on the ballot, to answer the poll and your question, here's who's on the ballot. Members of Congress. So the U.S. House of Representatives, those who represent us demographically, district by district. Anyone ever heard of Yvette Clarke, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, If you're in Queens, Congressman Greg Meeks, you know, our African-American elected officials, they are up every 2 years in the House of Representatives. And I'll tell you a little secret. If we outnumber the Republicans in this congressional election this year during this presidential election as well, we will have, for the first time, an African-American representing the third highest office in the United States, and that is Speaker of the House of Representatives. So we want to get up, go to the polls, and show out. Also, we have the U.S. House of Senate. This year, we have one person representing us statewide who is on the ballot. Her name is Kirsten Gillibrand, and she's elected every 6 years. So she will be on the ballot as well. If you want to find out who your elected representative by district, we'll take care of that later on in the presentation. Also on the ballot, New York State legislators, New York State Assembly, to the right, they're elected also every 2 years. You learn that district by district as well. So if you are living in Brownsville, you just heard from New York State Assembly member Latrice Walker, who is a Zeta Phi Beta, Zeta Phi Beta sorority member. And so you just heard from her, and she will be on the ballot as well if you live in the neighborhood of Brownsville and parts of East New York. New York State Senate, New York State judges, civil court judges will be on the ballot. They're elected every 10 years. So this is your opportunity. You will not get this opportunity again for another 10 years. Surrogate court, 14 years. These are who we'll see on the next slide, who determines our trusts and estates. Oftentimes we're left wondering, what did our family leave for us? So who is on the ballot again? All county committee people. These are individuals who does the work of the party for, you know, our districts in each assembly district. So that's who does the work, helps people register to vote, hire poll workers, things of that nature. They do the work of the political party. So if you're a registered Democrat, you want to, for example, become a poll worker or go into a different part of the district and learn more about what happens at the Board of Elections, you can connect with your county committee person. Judicial delegates, they're also elected every 2 years. And one of the things that they do is they nominate Supreme Court judges who in turn serve for 14 years. And in case they cannot serve, we also elect alternate judicial delegates. Next slide, please. So what do members of Congress do? We often hear congresswomen, congressmen, etc. They'll be present, they'll be here, they'll be speaking to us. They pass the federal budget, things that matter to us. So if there are students on this call, financial aid, FAFSA, federal assistance for student aid, Pell Grants, they're in charge of that. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those issues, okay? So they also have the power of advice and consent, meaning that they confirm our judges. You know, we have to remember who our associate justices are on the Supreme Court because they're in charge of what's happening with things such as affirmative action that was recently repealed. So we have to pay attention of who is selecting who and who's confirming who. U.S. House of Representatives, which we just talked about, and also U.S. House of Senate. So they are in charge of passing these laws that are affecting us directly. Next slide, please. The New York State Legislature passed laws for the state of New York and is responsible for passing billions of dollars in the budget for us. And again, if you're a student, your tuition assistance program, if you're expanding Medicaid, health in hospitals, all the things that we talk about, maternal morbidity, just recently, congestion pricing, all of these different things, the MTA, anyone take the train or the bus? They're in charge. The MTA is a state agency. So all the things that affect us directly and our budget for the city of New York, some of it comes from the state. Next slide, please. New York State civil court judges. So I know that the civil court, you're wondering, what do you do there? But if you have anything under $50,000 that someone owes you money for, you can take them to court for that. That's no small feat. So it interprets the law and can be placed in criminal or civil court after election. This is a big issue because we often talk about our Black and brown individuals being caught up in that cycle of juvenile delinquency, these different educational pipelines, and also landlord-tenant issues. These are where we see things moved around in New York State Civil Court and their judges. So we elect them for 10 years. Surrogate court judges, 14 years. Anyone ever heard of a will? Anyone ever, by show of hands, will, having an asset, okay? Things in your closet, your jewelry, your clothes, your house, anything that you consider an asset, your co-op, your condo, all of these different things, a list of items. You file these in the surrogate court. And if you do not have a will, then New York State laws of intestacy kicks in. And this is where the surrogate court comes in. And we know oftentimes there are issues with estate planning in our community. So we want to make sure that the right judge is there with the right mindset for our community. Next slide, please. As I stated before, we have county district leaders who carries out the work of the political party for the assembly district. So this, you want to make sure you vote for 2 different individuals, 1 female and 1 male. Anyone know who started this county district leaders and why? It's one of the oldest office in the state of New York. And one of the reasons is Eleanor Roosevelt, because she wanted to give females some power. So don't discount it. It may be down on the ballot, quote unquote, but a lot of the information that we need in our communities and to select county leadership comes from the county district leaders. We also elect county committee members, and county committee members, just in case someone leaves office and it's not within the time frame for an election, a regular election, we have what we call a special election. And it's usually the county committee members. We elect 4, we choose 4, who will vote for the nominee for this particular party position. Next slide. And the state committee member, they are affiliates of the respective political party. So for example, New York State's Democratic Party, they help to do the work of the political party statewide. So the statewide offices, governor, and attorney general, and all the other statewide elected officials, comptroller, etc. They do the work to help and continue the nomination process and do the work for that particular party. Judicial delegates, very, very important for Supreme Court. We do not elect Supreme Court judges directly. We elect judicial delegates and alternate judicial delegates to in turn nominate Supreme Court judges. So very, very important. These are trial court judges. This is where juries are selected, etc. You want to make sure that you know who are your judges in the unified court system. Next slide, please. So all of this to say that we must be engaged, civically engaged. Civic engagement usually precedes political engagement, because once you develop that civic identity and that passion, it flows naturally into this political engagement process. It becomes natural for you wanting to know who's on the ballot. It becomes natural for you just going to the polls. It becomes natural for you to say, hey, why can't I vote earlier? Why can't I mail in the ballot? And what's the process for doing that? Now we have those things thanks to one of our illustrious members of the assembly who you just heard from, who was sponsors of these bills, right? So civic engagement is working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities. and developing the combination of knowledge and motivation to make that difference. It's about your passion. If you're an artist, then have a party for the arts and then walk to the polls. You know, if you're a dancer, then party with a purpose and go to the polls, right? If you are a teacher, then educate your students about what it means to be civically engaged, because the more engaged people are, the less likely they are to do damage to their communities. So it encompasses learning, volunteering, and other community initiatives that serve to benefit specific segments of racial, cultural, and ethnic groups in our society. So when you see our students marching, whenever something happens that don't agree with them or don't agree with their race, their culture, and their ethnicity, and any type of barriers that is happening to their community, support them, because that's what they're doing. They're exercising their voice in a different way than we would exercise our voice. Next slide, please. So here are some examples, right? There are different ways to participate in the political system. It is natural for us to say vote, but as I was just saying, civic engagement as well. So we have some unconventional and some conventional acts. And history tells us that they work, okay? So we have voter registration and we have voting as traditional models. But before we all had this right, we heard the John Lewis Voting Rights Act being talked about earlier. Before that could happen, there was a lot of unconventional activities that had to take place. There was a lot of petition signing. There was a lot of letter writing. There was a lot of marches. There were a lot of protests, strikes, boycotts, other demonstrations, just so we can have this right. But you're not just going to have the right to vote. You have to continue and keep activating and then pay it forward, right? Help other people get registered to vote. So here are some conventional ways to participate. Volunteering on a political campaign, because we know sometimes big money controls politics. But if we volunteer, our time oftentimes is more than the money that's being in there, right? So because we can talk to neighbors, we can write letters to neighbors, and we can inform our peers about who to vote for and what's on the ballot. Donating to a political campaign, if you don't have a lot of money, $5, $10 goes a long way, because for state elections, now they have matching funds, which they didn't have before. It's 9-to-1. So $10 would give that candidate $90. So just think, $5 gives them $45 in matching funds. You can phone bank. You can go to their office. If you know that there's a candidate in your district currently running for office, you can go and phone bank to other voters. And finally, making sure that you vote, but don't just take yourself, take your whole household. If you have 3 adults in your household, make sure that they're registered to vote and turn out to vote on election day. Okay, next slide, please. And so here's the process. We know that there's a process of becoming civically engaged, and it's about civic learning, which we're in the process of doing. It's being aware, developing an identity, being actually engaged, political learning, political engagement, voting, which I hope we all do, political learning, civic learning, and both political engagement and civic engagement. So previously, if you could go back one slide. Oh, you could. That's fine. Okay. It's okay. All right. So this is where it comes together, right? Both civic and political engagement merges. And that's what you just saw on the last slide. So I wanted to get to it and show you how it all comes together. We just went through a redistricting process because it happens every 10 years, but it seemed like it was happening every year. This is where we draw districts, but it only matters if we can say that people are actually voting. We can only draw demographic representation that represents us if we could say 50% of these individuals are actually turning out to vote. So it's not just about drawing a line for a district or drawing a district so that where we can elect candidates based on how many African Americans or people are in the district. They have to actually show that 50% of the voting age population do come out to vote and will elect. So that's why it's important that we turn out to vote and that we do it consistently. Next slide. Next slide again. So I know this was quick and you had a lot to digest, and that's why we've left time for Q&A, but it is really time to mobilize. This Saturday, early voting begins, and so it's also the last day for voter registration for the upcoming primary election. And so if you know people, you're part of a church, set up the voter registration tables, have your voter registration code, or they can just go online and register to vote. These days, you can go online and register to vote, and we have the link. We could put it in the chat for you. And also, if you have any high school students, if they're 16-year-olds, they can pre-register to vote, and then they automatically become registered voters when they turn 18. As long as they're 18 by the time of election day, they can vote, but they can pre-register. Formerly incarcerated individuals can also vote. So do not let individuals tell you that they can't vote. Look, if convicted felons could run for office and become presidents, don't tell me people who have done their time cannot turn out to vote. So they can vote. If you need to change your address, you fill out the same voter registration card. If you need to change your political party, you can do that as well. By the way, in the primary election, you have to be registered to a political party. That is the purpose of a primary election, that you are choosing your nominee for that particular party. So for individuals who just chose blank, you are not registered to a political party, and you should go to the Board of Elections or download or go online and change your political party. If you need to change your address and update it, please do so. So any update to your voter registration status, please do so online again, if you can. Next slide, please. So who is responsible for voter education? Everyone, including you. So governmental agencies and elected officials. That's why we just had Assemblywoman Walker here giving you the lay of the land of all your rights with respect to voter registration and voting. How to mail in your ballot, how to vote as an absentee person, how to, vote early. So you can get information from your elected officials. Your labor unions, anyone a member of a labor union, usually they send out literature telling you who supports their interests. Educational institutions, school. That's why election day, they're normally closed, because that's where voting, most of the poll sites are in educational institutions. But any college students, that's the first rites of passage, right? Registering to vote and finding out more about who's on the ballot. Excuse me. Civic organizations such as Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, we're responsible. Churches, again, you all are here. Political parties, political clubs, and most importantly, you. If we teach you and tell you these things, and then you don't do your own research to develop your own identity and your passion and who you align with and your political views, then it will be all for nothing. So please, it's important that you take the opportunity and look up all the information that we've provided here today and click on all the links that we've supplied you with today to go out and vote, to go out and do your research, to be an educated voter. Next slide, please. And finally, here are the dates. June 15th, last day to register to vote. Early voting, 2 days before primary election. And again, primary election, they're usually more competitive for assembly districts and congressional districts than the general election. This is usually where we choose the candidates of our choice to represent us in their respective offices. And then up next is the general election, which we'll talk about again. We'll invite you back again for another community conversation to discuss what's at stake in the presidential elections. Next slide, please. Our second poll. Do you know where your poll site is? $50 million question. Take the poll.
Okay. Five more
Like
seconds.
Rita.
5 more seconds.
Okay. Many people know where their poll site is. So we don't have to put the link in. We shouldn't. So it not just knowing your poll site, but also knowing which booth to go to, right? Which table to go to when you get in, so that you don't have to stand online, right? Which electoral district that you vote in, not just the assembly, not just the school site, but which table do you go that you would see your name on that list, right? So if we could put up the link for the poll site. Next slide, please. You can put it in, we can put it in the chat. Next slide, please. Is that it?
Next slide.
So in case you needed to know your ED, we call it ED-AD, so your electoral district inside your assembly district, or you wanted to know what your ballot looks like, who are the individuals on the ballot, how you vote by mail, how you vote absentee, how you request the ballot. All the information is at requestballot.vote.nyc. For additional information, you could just simply Google Ballotpedia and find out more information about the ballot. Usually we find out things, whether or not there's a referendum, whether or not there are things to vote on. There are none now, and I don't think there's any in the upcoming general election either, but usually that's where you would go to ballotpedia.org. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now we've come to the end and we'll take any questions and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Blair. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Some takeaways that I got were: do not be outmobilized. Exercise your right to vote. Each one, teach one. And one thing that I was surprised about that I didn't even know, that 16-year-olds can now pre-register to vote. That's amazing.
Yes.
To be able to get your children civically engaged as young as 16 is amazing. And then just some takeaways. Please remember, early voting does begin this Saturday, June 15th. Please, please get out and vote. Exercise your right to vote. It's really important, especially in this election and the general election coming up. And the primary begins on primary election is June 25th. So now we're going to take questions and answers. Please put your questions in the chat. Feel free to also raise your hand. Our soror, Sheridan Jack Brown, will now facilitate the Q&A portion of this evening. Sheridan? I think you're muted.
All right, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that. My computer just crashed. Good evening. I'm sorry, hold on. Good evening, everyone. Sorry about that. My name is Sheridan Jack Brown. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. And I'm happy to assist you with any questions to make sure that you leave here, fully informed and ready to go to the ballot and make the right decisions for yourself and your community and your families and so forth. And again, thank you to SORA Dr. Zalima Blair and SORA Assembly Member Latrice Walker for providing us with all of this great information. So again, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can simply raise your hands and the hand icon, and we'll call on you to ask your question. So with that being said, give me one moment. Let me just look into chat and if I see any questions. Actually, I don't see any questions, but I do see, people basically thanking us.
I do
What do you
see some
see?
questions.
Where?
I have one, and maybe this is for Dr. Blair.
Okay.
When is the deadline to request an absentee ballot for the primary election
gotcha.
and the general elections? Thank you for that question, Judy.
Thank you. Usually they could request up until the day of election. So up until June 25th, they could request the ballot.
Thank you. I think I see another question. Are 16-year-olds able to pre-register in all states or just New York City?
I'm only certain about New York State, not New York City, but New York State. All states have their own election laws, so each state governs that. But again, Ballotpedia is very resourceful. They allow you to click on different states and find out the rules on those different states.
So I just wanted to add that the last day to request a ballot online or by mail is June 15th. And the last day to request it in person for a ballot by mail is going to be June 24th.
Okay, and I also see a question from Dr. Lorraine Richardson McCrae. Where can we find a copy of our upcoming ballot to see who is running?
Again, ballot. I will go to Ballotpedia. But there's also Find Your Ballot. I think it was on the presentation we put in the chat.
Yes, we did put it in.
Yes.
And then she also has another question. If you are registered in the Working Families Party, Independent or Green, can you vote in the primaries?
Assembly member, can they vote in the primaries? They got to vote for if they have a candidate that's on that particular ballot for that particular party. And each one has to have enough signatures to have made the ballot for that particular political party.
Right. So in New York State, we have closed primaries. And so you can only vote within the party that you're registered.
And then we have another question from Abraham Robinson. How can we better engage first-time voters and ensure they continue to participate in future elections?
Yeah, so I know everyone has their own methodology, but for me, civic learning and civic engagement, like staying informed, peer-to-peer information, social capital, that really helps people to vote. Your peers have a big influence on it. And also whatever civic organizations that you're a part of, whether it's a church, whether it's your place of employment, things that you like, things that you don't like, you have to vote your interests. And
right. So
stay engaged on your interests. Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of times what I've been saying to a lot of young people is, right now, Twitter and Instagram and TikTok are on the ballot, right? And of course, they love to be able to have unlimited access to the social media streams that they, spend many, many hours on. They are being regulated, and these regulations will happen either with them or without their voice. And so I've been encouraging them to do that. In addition to that, the Brooklyn NAACP Youth Council is also a very amazing way to participate. You can participate up to the age of 21, sometimes 25 in that regard. And we had a number of young people who came up to Albany to speak about the algorithms and other things like that, which are in social media, which again, were on the ballot because it was a major part of Governor Hochul and Attorney General James's legislative platforms this year.
Thank you. And then also, Mr. Robinson would like to know, can we discuss the impact on voter ID laws on voter participation and any measures that can mitigate the potential negative effects?
Ooh, you speaking to my spirit right now. So let me also say that you can register to vote at the age of 16, though you won't be able to vote until you are 18. So just wanted to point that out. And I believe you can be 16 to vote, to work on election day poll sites. But voter ID laws, we know, are ways by which folk are being kept out of the electoral process. I was in a huge battle this year, which will probably, create a lot of adjective for me within the next couple of years. But we have automatic voter registration. And with automatic voter registration, if you go to places like the DMV, for instance, presently we have what's called opt-in. So they have to ask you whether or not you want to be registered to vote. But of course, there are lots of people maybe from the South or whose name is Mel Anderson. I think I saw one of those whose birthday is messed up on their birth certificate, where it becomes a huge challenge for folk to be able to even go to DMV to be able to get a license. And so there are lots of racial, institutional challenges, racially motivated institutional challenges at the DMV. And so we're doing everything in our power to ensure that voter ID laws does not see any place within the state of New York. There are legislators who have introduced voter ID law legislation. But of course, we have been fighting it. So presently, you do not have to present a photo identification in order to vote, because we know that a lot of people just don't have the documentation necessary in order to provide or even get a driver's license or New York State photo ID.
Right.
But the governor did just announce that we have an online My ID platform. And so if you have access to that, I would say if you're on like myid.gov to be able to get that. So if you're stopped by the police or you need to provide ID, instead of taking a picture of your driver's license, you can utilize that.
So I just want to add on, that voter IDs, which sometimes they ask for it if you have a poll worker that, sometimes they do. It's important to know. That's like the cost of IDs are so expensive. That's like another poll tax, right? So also the Board of Elections, the first time you register to vote, they send you a voter registration card. So walk with that. That's your ID. It's not a picture ID or whatever, and it's free. So don't buy into this extra poll tax or let anyone ask you for ID, because I've had people ask me for ID when I'm going to vote, and it's not required. So there are states that do it, but again, that's another poll tax.
And if in New York State someone asks you for your ID, it's one of the things or issues that's covered by the Voting Rights Act, which we passed. So I would say to contact the Attorney General's office, or if there are poll watchers who are at your poll site, who sometimes are attorneys, sometimes are not. And then the New York State Democratic Party, I didn't get to mention that I'm also secretary to the New York State Democratic Party. We just announced with Governor Kathy Hochul that the New York Democratic Lawyers Committee has a statewide voter sort of access protection platform that was created. So we can provide that telephone number as well.
Thank you. So we have another question from Ms. Mackey. She would like to know, if you moved from Queens to Brooklyn, but still did not receive your new polling site, what should you do?
You can look up your poll site. You can look up on the poll locator site that we put in your address. You can find out if you're registered to vote at that site. And if you actually go to vote and you're not on, and you're not in the polls, in the rolls, on the election rolls in their book, you can actually ask for an affidavit, and then they can look you up, your vote could be counted.
Thank you. Then we have another question from Mr. Willie, who asks, how can we support our fellow citizens that are disenfranchised in other states like Mississippi, for example?
Again, I would give them the online resources and the online tools. Again, Ballotpedia, it lets you, it's in all the states. You can click on your state and they could put in their address and they can see all the information on the ballot, etc. So I would start there because it's very informative. They will know whether or not there's any propositions to vote on if they're in California, if they're in, or if there's any referendums to vote on. They will know everything about their ballot or how to access the ballot with Ballotpedia.
Thank you. So I also have a quick question. How is gentrification like impacting our local, elections?
So it impacts who you're actually able to vote for. How do you select a candidate of your choice? It really impacts, for me, redistricting, right? How we draw our districts. Because if individuals that are a part of the district do not vote with you, they're probably voting against you, and yet they're drawn into the district, they dilute your voting power. They dilute who you're actually able to vote for. You'll no longer have that strong majority African-American district that you once had. Also, it changes, right, your community of interest. In other words, what type of public policies you want to advocate for. If, for example, education is the biggest thing in East New York, or housing is the biggest thing in East New York, and this is now diluted with gentrifiers, this group of individuals coming together changes that voice, right? It shifts. It also hurts small businesses that serve that community. They're no longer viable. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, one of the things that I like to say is this: in the same way that they gentrify our communities, our politics are also being gentrified. And, and we'll see that very explicitly with a number of even some of the races that are upon us at the moment, where, some folk may even go for a candidate that, is the Black candidate or candidate of color. But you'll see that many of the people who are supporting them may not necessarily be that way. When it comes to redistricting, it's the one time we could have a conversation that is free and accepted with respect to race. And, I love to say that, I'm blackity black, 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 black. And that's my issues. That's the lived experiences that I come to politics with. And a lot of times, you'll get around folk, as they say, all skin folk and kinfolk. And you're like, I can't believe that they're up in here saying some of the things that are being said. And so you really just have to watch your elected officials. You have to hold them accountable. You have to ensure that the issues that you believe in are the issues that they're espousing, as opposed to going along to sort of get along with respect to certain party obligations. And that really just becomes on us. And when things don't work, we have the power of the vote to eject them.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. Jessica, do you see anything else in the chat?
Not questions, but I did want to highlight just two comments that were made by Ms. Pete Souvenir from the Commissioner from the Board of Elections. I saw two comments that she made that I thought everybody should hear. One was, know that the first day of early voting is called Golden Day, which means that you can register to vote on June 15th and vote that same day. Only on the first day of early voting, which is June 15th.
Good information.
And the second comment that she made was, please know that your early voting poll site is not the same as your election poll site. So please be mindful of that when you go out to vote for early voting this June 15th.
Good information.
Thank you
as
for
well.
that.
Yeah.
That was great information. And
Oh,
then
I do see, I'm sorry. I don't know if we asked, Lisa had a question, which is, when is the deadline to request an absentee ballot for the primary election? And we answered that one. Okay, thanks.
So Golden Day was introduced by Assembly Member Bobby Carroll, and it was a bill that came through our committee. So again, really how the legislative side of what we do sort of affects the everyday access to polls and elections.
thank you. That was great. I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I am ready to get out there and get people to go out and vote with me and not just by myself, because that's important, right? We can learn, but we want you to leave here and share this information with others, because that's how you get out that information. Yes, Sheridan.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Pepe Souvenir would like to say something about the absentee ballots. Go ahead, please. Thank you. And you need to unmute your mic.
Yes, I
There you
have.
go.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate this conversation. Assemblywoman Latrice Walker is basically my boss. What she does affects me and what I have to do. But what I wanted to say about absentee ballots is that know that when you request an absentee ballot and you decide on election day or early voting day that, oh, you know what, I'm going to just go in and vote, you can't. Once you've requested an absentee ballot, you have to vote by absentee ballot. So be very careful about making that decision about requesting it, because then what will happen is you'll go to the poll site and want to vote, and they'll tell you you can't because you requested an absentee ballot. You can push and they'll give you an affidavit, but who wants to vote by affidavit? So I just want you all to know, to let people know that if they request that absentee ballot, be sure that that's how they're going to vote. Thank you so much for letting me participate in that respect.
Thank you.
Another thing to help people, one of the things, and I know Commissioner Pepe and Assemblywoman Walker could speak to this as well. Sometimes we know individuals who have language barriers. They're supposed to be interpreters at the polls to assist with some of the languages. So that's important. Spanish, French.
So the languages are limited.
Yeah, it is limited, but also bring someone.
Spanish. Right. We have Chinese, we have Spanish, we have some Arabic languages. French, Russian, Yiddish are not part of the languages that allow people to get interpreters. What happens is that the mayor's office usually has, you'll see a table with an orange tablecloth on the outside of the poll site. Those people have those languages available for translation. But within the poll site itself, the languages that are available for translation is, like I said, Chinese, Spanish, and some Arabic languages. So that's an issue that we could discuss, because that goes back to the whole census thing and how they decide who gets what. And so that's why that is available. But yes, you're absolutely correct, Dr. Blair. And that is an issue within our communities of not having people available to translate for some in our communities that need it.
Thank you for that. So as we close out, it is our hope that you are leaving tonight's webinar more knowledgeable and encouraged to share this information with your family, neighbors, friends, and colleagues. We also hope that you will continue to help us move the needle forward by encouraging at least 2 or 3 people to be civically engaged and exercise their right to vote this June 25th primary election, as well as the November 25th general election. Again, I want to thank you to all our panelists, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker and Dr. Zulima Blair. Thank you again to all of our partners. Thank you to Commissioner Pepe Souvenir for joining us and giving those great tidbits that we need. And lastly, thank you to every single one of you for joining us tonight and continuing in the fight for democracy. Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
So much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Fun.